All right. So I just told you I was ready. So
Oh, are you ready?
I am. I think.
I think it's
So we're
verse
but let's look. We're in
17.
17.
Yeah. Honor the elders. Oh, this is going to be, I'm going to have to learn how to treat you right now.
Yeah, right. Okay. So who you want me to read?
I'll read.
Okay.
Let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. For the scripture says, "You shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. Those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest also may fear. I charge you before God and the Lord Jesus Christ and the elect angels that you observe these things without prejudice, doing nothing with partiality. Do not lay hands on anyone hastily, nor share in other people's sins. Keep yourself pure. No longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and for your frequent infirmities. Some men's sins are clearly evident, preceding them to judgment, but those of some men follow later. Likewise, the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden." We'll stop there.
All right. So as we look at this, and we already, kind of talked about in a couple episodes back about the idea that it was desired that that there be elders, that there be deacons, and that that was something that people should work towards.
Yep.
And again, here we still have, let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor, and this is a big work. It's not something that should be taken lightly. It's not, and as the brethren, I guess we need to understand that this is not something that is done in just a couple of minutes,
Right.
a day. It is something that it's a lifestyle, as it should be for every Christian.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as you realize this, you're going to give these people, as you should. I think this would apply to other brethren as well. Give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, that's probably a good idea.
Just in
all the
general.
time.
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, certainly when you have a person who's has some authority or is in charge of something, they're going to take some heat,
Yeah.
and that's always, if you've ever been a boss at work, you're going to take some heat
Yeah.
for the things other people do.
Yeah.
You don't even, and I've kind of been in trouble at work, not because of something I did. It's because of something somebody else did, and I'm answering for it.
Right.
Right. So a lot of times elders get involved in these things where they're dealing with messy situations,
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll get blamed for something that they had no control over. They didn't do it. So
Right.
you got to be careful with this.
Yeah, and we're keeping things in context here. We are speaking about elders who rule well.
Yeah.
Do not receive an accusation against elders against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses in verse 19. Then it says, "Those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest also may fear."
So the congregation is told to rebuke the elders.
Yeah. So and why would you do it in front of everybody? Wouldn't it be your first? In our human mind, wouldn't it be the first inkling to give them the benefit of the doubt and let's handle this in private? What's the value of doing it out front?
I think it would definitely make the elder more careful.
Yeah, and it also would show, that the rest also may fear. It would also show that even the elders are not above, the law.
Yeah.
And that would strike fear in other elders and other brethren. But something comes to mind there. Think about the religious groups that have been caught up in all sorts of scandal, that have covered things up.
Oh, yeah, and then it comes out later.
That have, and even though it's not they're not it's not the same thing. Some of them call themselves bishop, but they're clearly not a part of the church that the Lord established. They're clearly not conducting themselves the way that a bishop is outlined in the scriptures. But there are some who are called bishop by religious groups that have been involved in some very nefarious things, that instead of bringing that out and calling it out for what
Right.
it is as sin, they've hid it behind closed doors. They've tried to cover those things up and done more and more damage for centuries, and it's hurt so many people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
And it's still going on right now.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, that stuff still happens today.
yeah,
You know, the best way, I think the best way to deal with some situation of sin or even just wrongdoing is just to, at least I find it's, you know, I've done something wrong, I just admit it.
yeah. Just call it out and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's embarrassing,
Yeah,
just say, hey, I screwed up. I made a mistake.
I appreciate people that don't beat around the bush.
Yeah.
I it's not fun sometimes, but let's just get it over with. You know, let's get it out in the open. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
And let's just fix the thing.
Yeah.
You know, I have come to appreciate that. The older I get, you know, let's just be direct.
Yeah.
Let's not sugarcoat things.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get it out and deal with it.
And that's something that is more and more disliked and avoided in our society.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you come to the point where you can barely correct anybody for anything anymore in our society.
I know.
But the church is different.
The church is totally different.
Yeah,
I mean, you're going to have problems with it,
yeah,
especially if you have a problem with an elder who's involved in something. It's going to be, it's going to be a really rough situation.
right.
And, you know, it almost sounds like when we read some of these things, it's like, oh, yeah, it's just easy. You just have the elder go up there and everybody rebukes him. It's not a big deal.
Right.
No, that's a big deal. This is I mean, there's going to be shedding of tears
Yeah,
at a situation like this. Let me see what my note is here. I said that public sin is not a private matter,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
and that's, I think, what that's talking about.
right.
You know,
Yeah, and that's there may be something as well to this idea in verse 20. Those who are sinning rebuke in the presence of all. You know, everybody falls short, but you got somebody that continues.
Yeah.
You know, that word sinning seems to denote an action. It's an ongoing action.
Right.
Someone who just, you know, is just using the office and the, I say power, but the honor afforded such a one to do nefarious things that are against what the office should be. You know, that's time to rebuke and certainly call these things out.
he says, I charge you before God and the Lord Jesus Christ and the elect angels that you observe these things without prejudice, doing nothing with partiality.
Without prejudice.
That's tough sometimes because
Yeah.
I think what happens is sometimes there can be a let's say there's a big family in your congregation, and one of them's caught up in something.
Yeah.
You know, they may show a different amount of favor towards that person than they would somebody else, and I've seen that happen multiple times.
Yeah.
And, you know, not just at one congregation, at multiple congregations.
Right.
That's a thing.
It's people.
It's people.
Yeah.
So, you know, we got to be careful with those things. You know, if it's sin, it's sin.
You know, there's, you know, I don't want to create another criteria, but it's something to think about when you have an assembly of the saints, and you know what you want families to bring their children up in the care and admonition of the Lord and to create other Christians for generations to come. But when that happens, sometimes you end up creating a dynasty, you know, and that's you just have to be careful of that.
Yes.
The families should be aware of that. That they don't act like there's some
Right.
that they're the rulers of this local congregation because my grandfather's grandfather started this place.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I mean, my congregation. I mean, my aunt and uncle, some of my cousins. I have family that go there, and that's another.
Right.
I'm cognizant of that.
Yeah.
Because it can be a thing.
Yeah.
And we're all like bulls in a china shop. So I mean, it doesn't, and us all. So, it's a thing to be careful about.
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. So without partiality, without prejudice, it's interesting in 22 it says, "Do not lay hands on anyone hastily."
What do you think that means? I don't know. Does that laying on hands? Does that mean a spiritual gift?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that what you think? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because I don't think it would make sense to talk about
Yeah.
someone goofing up and you lay hands on them to physically punish them or something. I don't think it's talking about that. I think it's speaking of being careful what you do with the gift that you have.
Yeah.
It speaks somewhere back there about the gift that he received.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it means violence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It says, "Nor share in other people's sins. Keep yourself pure."
Yeah.
And that's we have a thing available to us. Most everybody in the world today has some form of social media. And I think that's one of the most dangerous places to share in other people's sins.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that we have to be very careful of. I think about it every day because I do get on and I get a lot of biblical information from social media. I have other preacher friends that I'm in contact with and I like to listen to their sermons via social media. I get a lot of study material and ideas from them through their posts, and so there's a little bit of value there. Certainly something that could be done without, but it's very easy to get yourself wrapped up in something someone else says, and then you say something that you probably shouldn't.
Yeah, I never, I understand this. I do understand this. But here's, I have certain things on YouTube that I like to look at, right? And then I see some half nude chick on a video, pops up.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't been searching for those kind of videos.
Right.
But what it is YouTube's oh, this guy must be in his 40s or 50s.
Right.
Here, those kind of guys like this. So, you're not intending to see that, but you do.
Right.
So I mean, that's a problem with the computer for sure.
Yeah, and you have to be you have to guard
Yeah.
against those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
And that, for some, that may mean you just don't deal with
don't look at
social
the
media.
dang thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't have any social media.
Yeah.
I do have a Facebook account, but so I can look at Marketplace,
Right.
which I don't know if maybe I did I bought my Suburban off of there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I bought a few.
I
things
use the
off of there.
marketplace stuff. I have weaned myself off of almost all online conversations.
Yeah, I
if
don't
I
do
get
any of
on
that.
there and do anything now, most of the time it's maybe to encourage someone, wish them a happy birthday, or something like that. But I really, several years ago, I would be more involved in trying to have a conversation with somebody online. But I've given up on that because I think in many cases, face-to-face conversation or conversation in a more personal venue, whether it's email back and forth or messages, but certainly not out there in the open, because it just doesn't get that kind of communication, it's just different. And
Yeah.
people look at
I'm not
that
a fan
differently.
of social media
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's anti-social media.
It is.
I mean,
Have you noticed? I've noticed this, that our young people have lost most of the ability to interact in a conversation. From answering the phone,
yeah,
and I mentioned this to my wife yesterday. My kids grew up watching me answer the phone. When I had my business, the phone would ring, you're going to be quiet because now I'm going to answer a business phone call. And they understood this, and they grew up listening to me
Yeah.
talk to people and have that interaction. And I called my son the other day while we were out and asked him to do something. And he answered the phone and he was like, yeah. And I'm like, are you there? Can you hear me? And then
Yeah.
I told him what I wanted him to do. And I'm like, and he's just silent. And I'm like, did you hear me? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, go do that. And I hung up the phone and I told my wife, I'm like, how does he not know, like the at least the courtesy to say, yeah, okay, I get you. So that those are things that have been lost along the way. And
yeah,
it's something that I think needs to be corrected.
yeah, yeah. I mean, hopefully, once they get in the
Yeah.
workforce, some of that stuff. But
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but in my house growing up, I wasn't allowed to answer the phone. And it was
I wasn't not till I was like maybe 12 or 13.
it was a big thing when I was
Yeah.
allowed to answer the phone, and I had to do it the right way.
Yeah. But I remember one of my early jobs, we got trained on phone etiquette.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was a thing, but we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I used to work in the office for one period a day in high school, and that was one of our jobs was to answer the phone for the high school.
Yeah.
And you learn those things. It was good. It was good training, and it was helpful. It was helpful in life
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
know how to do those things.
He says in verse 23, he says, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities.
All right.
Hey, Paul's saying get drunk.
Right.
Hey, Timothy. Is that what he's saying?
No.
No.
Yeah, and
He told Timothy to drink wine.
and that the idea of wine is something that is completely misunderstood.
Yeah.
Wine, the word that is used is the same that it would be used for unfermented
Yeah.
wine. And there are differences. There's a difference in the words.
I'm
but,
pretty certain this is fermented wine he's talking about.
but for what purpose? Why?
It was for his stomach's sake, and the idea actually, and maybe we didn't understand that years ago, but wine has alcohol. Alcohol kills germs.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a purification.
Yeah, so that actually mixing wine with water was very common back then.
Yeah.
It was a way to make water safe to drink.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all kinds of creepy crawlies in water.
Yeah.
If we when I was in Boy Scouts and we went out west and backpacked, we got our water out of the stream.
Yeah.
And that's what we drank when we were up in out in the back country. But we had to use iodine tablets to kill the creepy crawlies.
Yeah.
And we filtered it even further from there just to get some of the taste of the iodine out. But you can also boil it or whatever. But we had to go through some steps to do that, and that's what they were doing here.
Yeah, and boiling water was not, they didn't have like, iron pots all over the place to
Right.
boil water in.
Right.
It was a harder, and they probably didn't even understand that would do anything.
Yeah. It may be. But the other thing to get involved with there, and is that the idea of wine, even if we're talking about fermented wine, it was not anywhere near what we have today.
And the whole thing people miss about this is, the Bible condemns drunkenness.
Right.
So I don't care how you interpret it.
Yeah.
The Bible condemns drunkenness, however you interpret it.
Yeah.
And it condemns social drinking.
Yeah.
And so what's that leave you?
Yeah.
Well, you can use it for medicinal purposes. I would go so far that if you were having trouble going to sleep, you could probably have some alcohol to help you go to sleep. I wouldn't think that's a
Well,
that would be a medicinal purpose. I guess.
the idea of drunkenness, and I don't have this at the top of my head as to where we would look for this, but the idea is it's outlined in the scriptures of drunkenness is the process, to not begin the process of being drunk.
Yeah.
That's the prohibition, to not begin the process of being drunk. And so a lot of that comes down to the purpose.
Yeah.
What are you using this for?
Yeah.
Now the wise thing to do is to avoid getting yourself in a situation where you're drinking alcohol and you can even come close to being addicted to it.
Yeah.
And this is this prohibition here in verse 23 is no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake. So that they're not just drinking the wine to drink the wine. This is cut with water.
Yeah.
And
that was, I think it was typically at least cut by a third.
Right.
Typically.
Right.
So 1/3 wine, 2/3 water.
Right.
So I mean, you'd have to drink. You have to drink a lot, and it was probably about maybe 4 or 5% alcohol to begin with. Where modern wine's probably 19 or something.
And even
Or not 19, probably 14.
and even pure fruit of the vine, it has some beneficial effects.
Yeah.
I drink regular just 100% grape juice. I keep some in the fridge most of the time.
Yeah.
And I'll drink a little bit most every day, and I think it's beneficial for your stomach. Just keeping things going.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
your stomach, and so that's there's some of that here too. I think.
I mean, I know I haven't done it in a long time, but I've had bad colds where, I got a little bottle of whiskey and make tea with honey and lemon and take that before you go to bed.
Right.
And it makes you feel better a lot of times.
Yeah, and there's, it really all comes down to when you take something that the Lord allows us to have, and you take it and go overboard with it. It could be
anything.
It could be food as well. Could get us into trouble. But again, Paul's not telling him to just go drink alcohol.
Yeah, and God has not prohibited alcohol. He's prohibited drunkenness, and He's prohibited social drinking.
But I mean, it
banqueting.
It stands to reason. If you leave grape juice out for a little while, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and back then, when they, you had the new wine, it only lasted so long, the new wine.
Right.
Then it turned into fermented wine.
Right.
And it wasn't, they didn't think it was as good.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So, that's for another whole podcast to talk about alcohol.
Yeah, and we've actually talked about it in the past. I mean, it just go back and listen to some of the other passages that talk about alcohol.
Let it be known, Dave and John are not saying go drink alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, just being truthful with the scriptures, the Bible does not prohibit alcohol. It doesn't prohibit drinking alcohol, but it prohibits drunkenness and it prohibits social drinking. So take those two things away, and now what do you have?
Yeah. And when you think of, the wedding in Cana, Jesus didn't provide alcohol for them to get drunk. He provided new wine.
Yeah.
The fresh, unfermented.
Because they were like, man, this is way better than what we had.
Right. So that's, and when you think of when Christ was on the cross, they gave him the nasty sour vinegar wine, and that was supposed to be a punishment.
Yeah.
And there's probably people drinking something very near that today, and then
and they probably gave it to them on a sponge that Romans used to wipe their butts with.
Right.
On top of that.
Right.
So.
So, anyway,
Let's continue on here so we can get this.
as we go on, some men's sins are clearly evident, preceding them to judgment, but those of some men follow later. Likewise, the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden.
Well, it sounds like there were some people who were maybe doing some things that were wrong, and they were hiding them, and nobody knew about them.
Yeah.
And I think that's still true today.
And this idea of, but those of some men follow later, this speaks to the idea that it's not our job to exact punishment.
Right.
You know, I think of those that, you know, sought after, you know, Nazis, you know, after World War II, and I empathize and I understand, you know, the desire to bring justice and to exact justice for those things that were done, and I don't condemn the idea of bringing people to justice under the courts and, you know, the legalities of this life. But I do feel bad that there are some that were torn apart so much for the rest of their lives because of what other people did to them that they couldn't live their own lives.
Yeah.
And you realize that God will exact that vengeance.
Yep.
Vengeance is His.
Saith the Lord.
Right.
Right.
And so when someone does us wrong, when somebody does something, we don't need to worry about paying them back.
Yeah.
You know, that'll catch up with them.
Yeah.
And for people that, in verse 25, likewise the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden. You know, eventually, if you're doing no good,
Yeah.
it's going to show up.
It usually shows up. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a note here. I said Timothy needed to exercise caution when appointing men to responsible positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
be careful.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Paul was telling him.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
observe these guys for a little bit before.
And that's something that you know, we understand that when you hire somebody at your job, you know, you don't just automatically say, "Well, no, you're the manager."
Right, right, right.
You don't even hire somebody until
Yeah.
you've gotten to know them for a tiny bit.
I typically, you know, I've been pretty accurate with my hiring.
Yeah.
Not all. I've hired some people that maybe I shouldn't have, but
Yeah.
over the years I've been pretty good. I'm a pretty good judge of people.
Right.
But you know, sometimes you know, I've hired people and I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought this person was going to be great and they're terrible.
Yeah.
And you found out later.
Right.
You know. So one person in particular I'm thinking of, but I can't elaborate on that. So, all right, well that's it, John.
I hired a guy one time, and his interview told me that, you know, he was an older guy and he had retired, and he said that he only missed one day of work in the last 35 years. He called off every other week. But anyways, so when you try to hold back on something, it eventually comes back and shows itself, and the Lord will take care of all of that stuff in the end.
Yep.
Our purpose is to just carry out His will.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's 28 minutes.
Yep, that's good enough.
So we will see you next time.
Yep.